climbed to 22,000. So again, these are the things that we've been challenged over the year is increased calls for service and a decreased number of sworn officers. And I don't have to tell any of you, but that Washington County has grown in the last 8 years to 12.8%, and Tigard alone has actually done 13.6 growth. And again, our calls for service has gone up 27%, where our staffing has actually gone down 4%. Next slide. Okay, I would have liked to have actually had these in multicolors, but in the boxes, basically the city is comprised of 5 districts. And in an ideal world, you would want an officer in each district. And what this depicts is the fact that our minimum staffing levels, which haven't changed in the last 25 years, is 3 officers on day shift, 4 officers on swings, and 3 officers on graveyard, with the exception of Friday and Saturday, which is 4 officers. So you can see geographically, we are challenged by just how much we have to cover. And that'll be important later on when I talk about the ask and what we're trying to do. And the other thing that this doesn't show on this map is the fact that Washington County Jail is outside the city of Tigard, and all of our hospitals are outside. So when we have to either take somebody to jail, that'll take us out of service for 2 hours, or if we take somebody on a mental health police officer hold, that can take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. And so you can see all of a sudden our numbers will diminish quite rapidly. Now, day shift does have the advantage of, on a high emergency, to utilize our traffic officers, and our school resource officers could come out of the school to help out. So day shift does have some ancillary support. Next slide. And again, this is just a way to illustrate our calls for service. The blue line shows, again, how we've increased over the years. You can see 2019 dipped a little bit lower, only about 300 calls from 2018. So we believe this is our new normal, is to be in that 2,200. And the orange is our self-initiated. Those are your traffic stops, your follow-ups, your contacts, maybe in the park, anything that the officer generates themselves. And as calls increase, you can see our self-initiated goes way down. And a lot of times we hear those quality of life issues where they have speeding in a neighborhood or around the schools. They want to see us in those areas. And those are no longer, it's a kind of a luxury to be able to do those self-initiated activities. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, these are our categories of what we call response times. And a lot of times when we report this out, we're really focusing on the priority 1 and 2s, which is at the top of the screen. And those are 911 calls that are imminent or immediate threat to life. And you can see as the time goes on, it's taken us longer to respond, 6 minutes and 14 seconds. And I really want to get that number down to 5. And then the trickle effect is while we're on those priority calls, other calls will pend, and you can see we're climbing in the priorities 3s up to 10 minutes, and then 10 minutes for priority 4s, and each one explains it. But as I circled here, because a lot of our literature really focused on 2018 at the time when we started this campaign, so that was 6 minutes and 14 seconds. That it takes us to get to those priority 1 and 2s. And then the other important thing is to see that we're having more and more of those priority 1 and 2 calls. You can see we're up in 2019 to 4,400 calls. Those are resource intensive. That means everybody's dropping what they're doing and going to these calls till the situation gets resolved. And again, those are imminent and immediate threat to life. So this is really what we're trying to accomplish, is to get that number down and also to have enough resources to handle multiple emergencies at one time. Next slide. Now this is a fairly busy slide, and really there's a couple things I want to just point out. This is how we look at our workload distribution. What is driving our workload? And if you go into 2019, you will see we have them in different categories. Societal is those behavioral health calls. It can be your drug-related, firearms-related offenses, your trespass. A lot of when we're dealing with mental health and homelessness and drug addiction, they're in that category. And then you see persons and property crimes, so crimes against an individual or crimes against a property. And then last is just traffic. When we're responding to traffic crashes, traffic calls, those are the categories. And you can see 64% of our calls, our workload is in that societal. So it doesn't necessarily drive up our crime rate, but it sure takes a lot of resources and time to deal with those societal calls. And they really impact the quality of life of our community. So these are the numbers and information that I report monthly to the council, is really focusing on societal calls. Next. Now this is fairly new, and it's unique to since I've been here the last 3 years. I started hearing a lot of in shift briefings about individuals who are exhibiting mental health issues and or substance abuse or transient. And again, that really caught my attention. So about 2 years ago, I started asking officers to put the code BHI in their call if it had anything to do with either a mental health incident, somebody who's in crisis, substance abuse and or transient, or it could be all. And just be very clear, we don't diagnose anybody. It's just whatever behaviors they're exhibiting at the time. And I would ask the officers to put it in the CAD call so we can pull out that data. And for the last 2 years, I've again been reporting out to the council. So to give you an example, this is 2019. We spent 1,566 hours with some sort of behavioral health component to these calls, which covered about 2,700 calls. And this only reflects the hours, not the number of resources. Many of these require 2, if not 3 officers at a time. So that really equates to almost 2 full officers just to handle these types of calls. And again, they don't really necessarily impact the crime rate. So our crime rate has stayed consistent, but it certainly really challenges our resources. That's where John can sit there and go, our cooperation with Luchtdorf and some of those other facilities is kind of the things that we're dealing with. And so again, it's not scientific, but was just another way of capturing the types of calls, because these are, when somebody's in crisis, it may take quite a while to get things under control, get them calmed down, get the resources that they need. And should we feel they're a danger to themselves, then that's going to be a hold. And again, we're seeing that the hospitals are taking anywhere from 1 to more closer to 3 hours that an officer could be tied up. Next slide. So again, this is the ask, what would the levy do, and what hopefully does it mean to our Tigard community? We've asked for 8 patrol officers, and really is to try and get us closer to covering all districts 24/7, 365. We would change the minimum staffing from that 343 to 454 to accomplish that. Our goals, or what we'd be monitoring, is trying to get our emergency responses under 6 minutes with a goal of 5 minutes or faster. Officers can then handle more than 1 emergency at a time. And we could then assign officers to the same district so they get to know who belongs in there, what the particular issues are for that area. And you get a lot more continuity, and it fits in that community-oriented policing concept. So we build stronger relationships with our community. And then the other ask is for 1 school resource officer. When I got here, we had 4. With some of the budget cuts, we've gone down to 2, with one in the high school and 1 covering both of the middle schools. if we were to get another SRO, school resource officer, we would then assign one to each of the middle schools so they could stay again in the school constantly and build that relationship that's so important at that developmental age. And then the other kind of the not so sexy part of this, but so important, is it would allow for advanced training in crisis intervention and de-escalation. That is not a requirement. We get basic ones in the academy, but the advanced really, you hone in your skills. And it's right now it's a week-long training, and we only are able to get our officers in maybe 2 or 3 a year. This would allow us to either host it or get the majority of us in the first 2 years. And I think that's critical, and it's in line with the 21st century policing model that came after Ferguson, and I'm talking about de-escalation skills. And then there is some support staff. There's at our records and our property and evidence, because obviously if you have more officers, you're creating more evidence, more reports, and it allows for the IT support. So that is it in a nutshell. And I went extremely fast, but I want to also be able to allow for any questions that anybody may have.
So Chief, I had a couple of things that came to mind when you were talking. One is it kind of seems like one of the things that might be driving the need for more officers and the increased response times is also the fact that the City of Tigard is building out in River Terrace, which is way on the other side of Bull Mountain. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the growth is obviously does drive some of these, whether they're just by population, traffic density, all of that. And so you can imagine if you go back to the one map, even a District 3 car would travel from kind of downtown all the way out to River Terrace. And even in lights and sirens in, let's say, commuter traffic, it's going to take you a little bit. So trying to geographically right here go from one point is better than going from all the way at the top of the city and coming over to River Terrace. So obviously, if you geographically place more cars, intuitively, you would think that your response time is going to go down. The other thing we'll have the ability to do is see how many times we're pulled out of our district because of whatever type calls. So we can see if our theory pans out or if we're still challenged by other things. But by displacing everybody and geographically spread out, I'm hoping is that we get there just faster when it counts. Because our number one priority one call is our CPR. And oftentimes, John will hear you probably tell you that sometimes we can get there faster just because our cars are faster. We don't have a whole big fire truck rig. And we've had 2 or 3 life-saving per year where we've been able to apply AED or naloxone to an overdose. And so those minutes and those seconds do matter.
It also, I was kind of thinking that if your societal calls are going up and your calls are also going up for anything that might be mental health or behavioral health related, the inability to manage those effectively and respond to them along with everything else, I would think that that's going to affect the quality of life for the community overall, right?
Yeah, and that runs the gamut. You have those, as you know, down on Main Street, businesses are dealing with transients. Some choose to call the police, others don't, because they're concerned that we're actually going to negatively affect them, possibly arrest them, and that's not what the desire is. And we understand that, and really we're just trying to see, do they need anything, and maybe get them to move along because businesses are still now opening up. But so there, and we get calls all the time of concern, especially during the pandemic, when the library isn't open and some of those other resources. We're getting calls of people just sleeping on sidewalks, and they're concerned for their welfare, and that requires a response each time. And we may get 10 calls on that same individual who's moved along maybe 99. So yeah, those societal calls are the ones that are the most important to the community. But again, it doesn't equate to an actual crime. And so I've been asked, well, why don't you have a social worker do this? Well, you can have a social worker attached to you, but no matter what, we're going to be the ones that get called while they're in crisis or why there's a concern just from the caretaking, and we have the tools. So no matter what, we're going to go, and then we can make the referral to the other resources.
Great, thank you, Chief. So kind of in summary, the ask is for 8 officers plus an SRO plus a couple of admin staff, and then advanced training in crisis intervention and de-escalation. And my understanding from visiting the website for the levy is that on average is believed to probably cost the average homeowner about $6.95 a month. That's what that 29 cents per $1,000 of assessed is.
Correct.
So, okay, great.
And the one thing I kind of didn't mention that I think it bears mentioning is outside of all the data that I provided, you still, I think as a community member and a business owner, want to know what an independent person would think. And so as you recall, in 2019, the city did an independent audit of all of the departments, all the city services. And I was pleased to see that using all the data, all the CAD data, and did their own number crunching, that they also identified 8 officers as a need. And within a year, another school resource officer. And within a year, as we add on, they said the support staff was needed. So again, for me as a chief of police, I'm glad to see that somebody who does this for a living is going to all these different police agencies, that, you know, our ask was reasonable. We weren't going above and beyond. We just felt like it was going to help us get caught up and actually address the growth that we're seeing.
Great, thank you, Chief. Okay, now I think we're going to move into our questions for our panelists that we have prepared here in advance before we open it up to our Facebook community. And I see that Wajdi Saeed has joined us. Welcome, Wajdi.
Thank you.
One of the first questions I have for our panel, and I'm going to call you guys by name so we can kind of stay organized with this since we're all virtual. I'm going to ask each one of you, how has Tigard Police supported or interacted with your business or your organization in the past? So Maureen, I'm going to start with you if you want to talk to that.
Oh my gosh, so great presentation, Chief. Just as a citizen, I really appreciated the information, and really clearly the whole board supports this effort. And from, you know, I'm here really to speak about the school resource officers and their critical role. And I think of just different times as a parent or as a board member, I've been present at the schools, and they are there at our assemblies, or they're in our elementary schools teaching DARE, or just connecting with kids, creating positive relationships. And I'm just grateful to have them with such a positive presence in our buildings. And just wholeheartedly support this effort. So I think, Debbie, I'll stop there and then dig more deeply later on.
Okay. Maria, could you comment kind of on how your Washington Square Mall or your retailers have interacted with TPD in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Over the last decade, and really longer, the mall security and Tigard PD have enjoyed a really strong partnership. The security manager meets with commanders regularly to discuss issues we're having or seeing in the retail community. We hear about hot buttons in the community that may impact the shopping center. So that relationship is crucial. The retail crime unit also meets monthly with loss prevention departments for many of our stores and businesses here. And they share trends, which helps, each side leaves more educated about what's going on. Mall security has assisted Tigard PD with case resolution on criminal incidents. We've jointly performed drills and training on the property on a variety of scenarios like active shooter, bomb threats, natural disaster, canine training, etc. This helps us both be better prepared in the event of a larger scale emergency, but also improves communication, trust, and understanding between the shopping center in Tigard PD. It's just really important as businesses are scouting possible places to open, they evaluate the area's crime rate, and in our case, loss prevention through shoplifting. Tigard will be a more attractive city for new businesses if crime is kept low.
Great, thank you very much. John Trin, can you comment on how Luchtdorf has interacted with Tigard PD in the past, how they've supported your organization?
Yes, thank you. So Tigard Police provided periodic support to our program participant in the form of community-based crisis de-escalation, transportation to medical care in times of mental health crisis, and partnership in providing outreach to homeless community members. And we've been a partner with the Tigard PD for many years, and we've been here since 1977.
Great, thank you, John. John Voigt, would you like to comment from Sherry's Jewelry Box what your interaction's been with Tigard PD and how they've supported your business?
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here. First of all, our more recent issues have been transients, as were stated by the chief, and the officers have really done a good job trying to keep the presence of transients and folks that look or seem to have mental issues and or be on drugs. They've really kept that down more recently. I know that's a weird comment to make, that look or appear like they've been on drugs, but that's been really nice. And our relationship with the Tigard PD goes back a really long time with us here on Main Street, all the way back to when I was a kiddo going to work with mom, which still happens. But when I was a kiddo, I remember them coming and telling us, okay, John, Sherry, it's time to go home. It's dark, it's late, you guys are here alone, you shouldn't be here. So their personal relationship, I don't really feel like it's an officer peasant type of situation. I feel like it's a friendship, a community, and I look forward on that becoming even closer established as we go on.
Great.
Thank you.
Wajdi, would you like to comment on behalf of your community how Tigard PD's supported you in those interactions?
Thank you very much, Debbie, for such a wonderful panel, and I'm very thankful to be part of it. I have got engaged with Tigard, in my capacity running a nonprofit in Tigard, the Muslim Educational Trust, from 1999. So we have, since 21 years has passed, we always had an excellent relationship with the city leadership, and particularly the police, from Chief Orr, and now we are blessed with Chief McAlpine, Chief Kathy, and the commanders, Rogers and McDonald, and the officers. All of them are wonderful people. As my dear friend, from Washington Square said, it's all about trust and understanding. The trust is there, the understanding is there. Our annual, the biggest ever in the nation, the building bridges of understanding between law enforcement, the federal law enforcement, the local, and the civic, nonprofit organization. About almost 400 people comes, and City of Tigard Police is always there, in participation, in sponsorship, and safety and security. And this is what is all about community policing. When the community and our sisters and brothers in uniforms are together, there'll be a lot of good miracles happening, understanding, trust, and then civic engagement for the safety of all. We are very thankful to be in the City of Tigard. We are very happy with our chief, and I think more money will help and support, the growth and the training of more diverse, multicultural officers will help also to engage, the growing professionals in Tigard, especially in Bull Mountain, where most of our community members, live. The educated ones lives, and also the low-income families that live, also the immigrant and refugees that lives within, Hall Boulevard and other places. We love our chief, we love our officers in uniform, and we love the police department.
Thank you, Wajdi. Okay, so the next question for our panelists is, what would concern you about TPD only being able to respond to one 9/11 priority call at a time across the city? in any given shift. So I'm just going to use the same order I used before. So Maureen, would you like to comment on that? You need to unmute.
Thank you. You'd think I would have this Zoom thing down by a month of Zoom meetings. You know, as I was just listening to everyone comment, I'm just going to give a specific example of what it meant for the presence that Tigard Police has had in our district. I remember as a parent being and a board member at the Tigard High Assembly in December, the day of the Sandy Hook shooting. And just the presence of our officers, our friends, our partners in our schools at a time that was shocking. And I just think that having that increased support and capacity, we just don't know what's around the corner. And I'm not saying that out of fear or worry. I'm just saying out of respect and the importance and priority our officers play in our buildings. So I just want to see this support and this levy passed to get our ability to improve those 911s and take care of our community. So thank you. And I will unmute myself.
Thanks, Maureen. Maria, what would be your concerns from Washington Square large retail with TPD only being able to handle one priority 911 call?
So sometimes it's about just handling one, and sometimes it's about needing enough officers for a large scale emergency that could happen anywhere. But for Washington Square, for a large retail, restaurant, hospitality campus like ours, having fast and robust first responders, police, and fire is incredibly important for so many reasons. In an emergency, particularly if the situation impacts employee or safety shopping, quick police presence, like Maureen just said, just even the presence, but also the incident management translates to a better, safer outcome for all the people on site. I also want to point out, like I said earlier, that some large incidents require few people to come. And if there's only 3 in the area, then that makes that very difficult. But even for property crimes and shoplifting and situations like that that are less large scale, fast access to police mean a higher likelihood of catching bad guys and returning property and making both retailers and customers feel more protected. Additionally, shopping centers like us enjoy a reputation that it's hard to get away with crime here in Tigard. And it is a deterrent for organized retail crime and other offenders that are choosing a target. So we want to maintain that level of deterrent for future crime as well. Investments in a strong police department today will benefit businesses in the community now and in the future.
Thank you.
And Debbie, could I just give an analogy on the 2 emergencies at once?
Yes.
So Tigard is situated around, you know, Hillsborough, Beaverton, Tualatin, even Sherwood, all King City, and Washington County. So when a big emergency happens, everybody comes, that regardless of jurisdiction. So we're thankful for that, and that will never change. For example, the bank robbery in Beaverton that turned to a homicide, that turned to assault. You know, at the end of the day, there were 70 different officers out there. And some people think, wow, Tigard's got a lot, but it's not. There were 7 different agencies. For everybody was coming from everywhere. So that's an extreme, and we'll always have that luxury. But in a real day, every day, we had an individual who's in a mental health crisis on top of his roof. We were trying to talk him down. We had the kind of the house surrounded, trying to work with him. At the same time, we had a call by the high school of somebody had fallen down or was down, ended up being a CPR call. A Washington County officer had to go handle that call. So that's when we say 2 different ones at the same time. By having a few more, maybe somebody could have broken and handled that and been closer by. But that puts it in a little bit of context.
Great, thank you, Chief. John Trin, would you like to comment on kind of that ability to only handle one 911 small scale at a time.
Sure, limited response time or availability to emergency call creates safety concerns for residents in our Tigard-based residential program, as well as our clinic staff. While there's rare that we have emergency issue at the office, we depend on swift response from our Tigard PD to provide assistance that we may need. And the Tigard Police Department has done a great job in terms of working with us and working with our residents as service recipients to make sure that they are cared for in a way that is going to be beneficial for them and also for the community.
Great. Thank you, John. John Voigt, would you like to comment on that question?
Yes, obviously our goal here in Tigard PDs is to preserve the health and safety of all the locals here, whether they be customers, passers through, business men and women that work and live in the area. And the earlier that we can have trained individuals involved in any situation, no matter its level, the better chances we all have of going home without injury. The ability to handle two potentially deadly situations is a much better possibility that somebody gets to go home with minor injuries and possibly their life. Not to mention, of course, the art of the preventative measure presence that additional officers would have, that positive impact that would have in a preventative way. Thank you.
John. Wajdi, would you like to comment on that for your community?
Yeah. I think, with the if we want to achieve, a great economic development in the city of Tigard, we have to make sure that we attract, the best, companies, the best, residents, the best, community civic organizations, and having, investment in our community policing and increasing the police capacity, to do service more and more. It requires money. And I think it's very important for us, that for this levy to pass, that we trust, our leadership within the city, within the police department. And I think Tigard is becoming an international city, whether we like it. Yes, we are a small city, but it is a very well diverse city. It's not anymore the city that we know 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So I think it's very important for us, to engage in a smart way, in an engaging, loving way, responsible way. And we are lucky, seriously, to have, leadership within the police department that understand, the diversity and the multiracial community in Tigard, and investments, like this will make a great difference, rather than working out our officers, with the limited, resources and limited budget.
Thank you, Wajdi. So I want to talk about school safety. I mean, we've touched on that already, but we have both a public school district and then a private school represented today here on our panel. So Maureen, can you share why you and the school board support this measure?
Absolutely. I'd like to, the chief showed a chart early in her presentation, kind of putting patrol cars and how they're able to service the city of Tigard. And I have a similar analogy for our district. We have 16 schools in the Tigard Tualatin School District. 10 are within the city of Tigard, 5 in Tualatin, and then 1 in King City. So in Tualatin, we have 3 school resource officers, 2 at the high school, 1 at the middle school. And then as the chief mentioned, for the city of Tigard, we have 2. And we have 1 at Tigard and 1 going in between our middle schools, because those really are the primary targets. And then if something is needed across the other schools, that's supported as well. So we are a huge advocate in support of this because the need's there. And so that sets the framework as to absolutely how valuable this additional SRO would be. But the bigger piece too is we touched on that, is the why. They build relationships, they connect with our students, they become part of our everyday fabric of the school. And climate and culture is one of our strategic cornerstones. And when the school resources officers are there, students start to feel comfortable with their presence. If they're concerned or concerned for their friends, there's that connection to really share with our officers, and they're highly valued in our schools.
And if I could just add to that, we've seen it even more highlighted during our stay home kind of campaign is our DHS referrals that a lot of times come from teachers and mandatory reporters. They're down significantly. However, we can only assume that there's probably concerns or abuse because they're actually staying home and not being able to go out and be in the safety of the schools. And that the school resource officers play a big part in working with the counselors in identifying those kids who may need our protection. And so you can imagine, you're right, to cover both middle schools would be extremely important for us to be able to do. And at this time, given our structure, we just couldn't, even though we know clearly it's a good value.
So Wajdi and Maureen, I'm going to ask you both to just talk about what an increase in overall, so not just an SRO, but an overall police staffing levels would mean to like your educators, so your teacher communities, your students, and then the parents of those students. I'm going to start with Wajdi.
So with the rise of Islamophobia, we face a lot of challenges as the American Muslim community growing in in the public square. So I think it's very important for us, as a community, to be integrate our services, by design, and this healthy relationships with our law enforcement is a key factor for us. I mean, the City of Tigard Police Department, for the last 20 years, we are very thankful that, they keep an eye in our property, in our engaging with our staff and our parents and our students. And their presence there, it brings a lot of comfort, I'm really speaking from the heart, and my mind, as an engineer, I'm very critical, about reality. And having a police department that understand, that cares, is a must for us. Community policing is a must for us. We cannot defeat Islamophobia. We cannot defeat anti-Semitic sentiments or the rise, of X and Y and Z supremacy without having, an understanding police department and police officers, and especially, the educated one, the trained one. And when I mentioned, to our communities nationwide, I attend conferences in the nation, and people surprised, how our local police department is loving and caring and responsible. I'm speaking about collective, the police department in the metropolitan, especially in Tigard. So community policing, school policing is not that, look of a harsh officer coming, to the premises. Is the loving and caring and smiling, individuals, they are our sisters and brothers in the first place, and having a uniform is at the service of the people. That's what makes really a difference. And that's what will heal and unify when we are caring, responsible officers or individuals within our city.
Thank you. Maureen?
I'll piggyback on that to start with. It really is building those positive relationships. They're a tremendous resource. I think I had already mentioned in our classrooms. It also opens up that exposure to all aspects of being a police officer, and to really give a career lens, and that also kind of long-term perspective for students, and to see the value that police officers provide in communities. And I also hope, our campuses are large. Our middle schools, I think Fowler's a little over 800, Tuolumne Middle School's 1,000, Tigard High is 2,000. I mean, they're their own communities within their buildings. And if we, for example, by having another SRO provides more flexibility as well, when we know there's some challenges coming in, for example, I've had multiple conversations with one of the vice principals at Tigard High, And Halita knows that in the evening sometimes that can be an elevation of trauma or concern, and information is fed to Safe Oregon. And if we had that additional support in the morning when students are arriving early to connect with them and to be present, it really makes a big difference. And again, it's that positive relationship. How can I connect with you? How can I help you? And I appreciate what the chief said right now with remote and distance learning and ensuring, you know, how our families are doing. It's very real, and the role of our SROs matters in those commitments in our schools. It's very important.
Thank you, Maureen. So my next question is for John Trin. So one of the things that's in this ask is advanced training for officers to assist in crisis intervention and de-escalation of mental health crisis, because a lot of times the police department is a first responder to someone who's in crisis. So as a leader of a behavioral health organization, John, how do you view that? Do you view that as being an important factor for your community, for your staff?
As a behavioral health agency, we know that many members of our communities may struggle with mental health concerns, and that the majority of people who experience mental health crisis are often not affiliated with mental health services provider. And therefore, during times of mental health crisis, there's a likelihood that the Tigard PD may be the primary first responders. And when responding to officers, having the knowledge and the awareness and the skill of an effective de-escalation of crisis situation is important. And the likelihood of using force decrease drastically if they have that tools with them. So it is important for that training for the police officer.
Great, thank you, John. So now I'm going to switch over here and talk to our retailers, both large and small. And Maria and John, can you share your perspective kind of from your different points of view why faster response times, which we would get with increased police staffing for business, is important? And let's start with John.
Yes, faster response times, as just to roll back to what I said earlier, the faster that you can have somebody trained on scene, the better likelihood you are to retain the safety and health of everybody involved, the better likelihood we're going to be able to retain our merchandise if that's in question. It's a much better situation. And not to veer away from the question too far, but the SROs are also extremely important. I can remember growing up and having those officers in our school. And at first I thought that they were, no puns intended, there to police us. They were building a relationship. They were keeping us safe. And I still have very fond memories. I know their names, Derek and Jared. I have Officer Derek and Officer Jared. It was just a blessing to have looking back on it now. But yes, I firmly believe better training, not that they're not already well trained, but it's better training is incredibly important, and faster response times are appreciated. Every second matters.
Great, thank you. Maria, do you have any follow-on comments with relation to the mall and response times? Unmute.
There we go. Now we both did it. Yeah, I think I touched on this earlier, but having a quick response time is critical to community and, specifically our shopping center community and employees and shopper safety. It's going to take us to less crime ultimately, but in the event of a large scale emergency, it's safer and better to have the professionals here to do incident management and take care of everyone, and it makes everyone feel safer as well because they are safer. But yeah, we've sure enjoyed a really great relationship with Tigard PD, and their response rate has historically been amazing. But we need to make sure to fund their departments so that they can continue to have those resources.
Great, thank you very much. And I think we kind of already covered how mall security interacts with TPD. I think you already talked about that. So I don't think we need to ask that question unless you
Okay.
have something to add.
I have to jump off. I feel
Okay.
terrible, but
That's
I
fine.
have another meeting.
Okay.
Anyways, thank you, Chief, for that great presentation. You really articulated why we need this measure.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for
Thank
the
you, Maria.
support.
Chief, I think you had something that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I just thought it would be good to put it out there in information. And it was kind of alluded to with the mayor's walking video. People got to see that at the State of the City, but also in all my outreach. There were a couple of things. First, the standard question, how many officers do you think are working right now? And I have to tell you, there were quite a few people that said, oh, about 100 or 30 or 40. So they were shocked to hear 3 or 4. And then the other part is, the other things I hear is, well, why do I see so many police cars at the station? And to answer that is, first of all, most police stations, they have a secured parking, so you never see the volume of cars. But we are a 24/7, 365 business and agency. And so we need, enough cars for all 3 shifts. And there's shift overlap. We have a couple hours overlap on as we transition from officers getting on and officers coming off. And so we have the right number of fleet. Now also you have to have a couple, because if somebody has defecated in a car, it has happened, or bloodborne pathogens, we have to basically redline that car and have it deconned. And then others, if you drive the car too hard, use the brakes too much, you might have to sideline that till it can get looked at. So the fleet size is not a 1-for-1 officer working right now, because the officers don't have take-home cars. So those are there just to meet our 24/7 operation.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So one last question before we open it up for questions from our Facebook community. And you and I had talked about this before, Chief, but if this levy doesn't pass to be able to add extra officers, get advanced training, add an SRO, what does the next 3 to 5 years look like?
Well, first of all, I hope people recognize there is no threats here. This isn't a vote for something or else. That has never been this last year and a half statement. What I'm challenged with is making other decisions to make sure patrol is staffed accordingly, and that the officers who are doing the 911 responding are doing so safely. So that is always constantly looking at those numbers. And the only way I can pull them back is to have our traffic officers. So when we're short, if a motor's working, they're now handling 911 calls. They're not working in your neighborhood for traffic problems or at the school high visibility. They're just another call responder. So I have to pull from resources to meet the needs. So it's a give and take. And we are a full service organization. So we have the detectives that have to follow up on those felony calls. As mentioned before by Maria, is our commercial crimes unit, which is funded a lot by the business license fees, but they're extremely busy and phenomenal. But the priority will always be patrol handling 911. And so I will be tasked with making some decisions. I think the council has also said that they're concerned enough that they're going to try and figure this out. So I know I'm not on an island by myself, and I have tremendous support both in the community, but also from city leadership and from the council on, they know this problem is real. And so I look to them to help also address this issue one way or another.
Great, thank you, Chief. Okay, Jessica, I saw you holding up a question card. Do we have questions from our audience?
We do. The first question is from Carrie. She says, I'm curious about recruitment from job posts on the City of Tigard website. Also, news around our country. I know recruiting for police officers is difficult. If the money is approved, how will you recruit for these positions that is different?
Well, different. We're all fighting for the same talent pool per se. And especially in the last 10 years, maybe 8 years, the desire to be a police officer has really gone down in across the country. And so we're all pulling from the same smaller group. And then plus we all want to have the diversity that reflects our community. So we've continued to do outreach. I mean, we're not going out obviously with the pandemic, but a lot of times I'll just hear, you know, our social media, that people get excited about what we're doing. I had a few that just said, just based on your immigration stance that was on your website, and their person was from the Latino community, said, I'd like to come work for Tigard. So I think doing those kind of things, doing the outreach, being accessible, but also kind of keeping an eye on those individuals who really want to serve this community in particular is what we're looking for. So we'll look at our colleges. We look to all of you, to people that you think have the skills. We'll look at anybody. But yes, we are always going to have to compete. When Portland is down almost 200 officers and their packages is quite a bit, then it's hard to compete with them. So you're really looking for people who want to serve maybe our particular community.
Very cool. Thank you. Next question. Well, it's a two-part question. What other areas of the budget have been examined for creating funds for the issue that you are trying to address with the levy prior to coming to taxpayers? And are there any assets that could be reallocated?
Well, I will tell you, being part of city leadership and you know, being at least in 3 different budget, since I've been here in the last 3 years, it's always been cut packages. And so city departments, each department has had to do cut packages over the last couple of years. And so the challenge is, you don't want to be only a police city. You want to be able to enjoy recreation. You want to be able to enjoy the library. You obviously need public works to take care of the infrastructure. And we're still a growing city, so you need economic development to keep up with the current times. And so I believe I have seen each of our departments having to make cuts just to meet the budget needs. And so I think while it's easy to point and say, well, we can do without this or X, Y, Z, each person values something different. Some want the robust recreation package to enjoy the parks. And so I think we kind of cut where we can, and now we're just saying our services can't keep up with the growth, and the growth in itself doesn't pay for the services that we need. So we're having to look, and we're not the only city having to do this. All across Oregon, I've seen many that either already have a police levy, because that is usually the priority service, or they've gone to a fee structure, but their general fund budgets aren't keeping up with the demand either.
Very cool. Thank you. Next question. Washington County is replacing a safety levy. What is the different, which is different than the Tigard levy being spoken of here? What's the difference like between those two?
You know, that's a great question. And in an ideal world, you wouldn't want to look like you're competing with 2 different criminal justice entities. Washington County provides so many other services. They have the jail, they have the DA's office, they have all these that us smaller cities rely on. So they have to adequately staff the jail, they have to have the DAs be able to handle and prosecute on these crimes. And then of course, all of the sexual assault units, domestic violence units. So that's a more structured one that they're providing, and to keep it going. Where ours is simply patrol officers on the street dealing with the issues in Tigard. But if Washington County fails, then you're talking about a bigger criminal justice infrastructure. And so I hate to say it, but we need both, because it's one doesn't replace the other. By passing to Washington County, you're not going to get more Tigard officers. And by passing just Tigard and not Washington County, we may not be able to, take as many people to jail or prosecute the people that need to be prosecuted. So people would see an impact in services in that way as well.
Thank you. And then next question. This levy isn't addressing a new building. Are funds for that coming from somewhere else?
it seems to be our needs are great. Since I've been here and 5 years before that, this is an aging building. It doesn't keep up with our current staffing levels, let alone what it may need in the future. But that would be a different approach. That is talking about bonds. There was a presentation to council on how we might be able to accomplish that with hopefully little to no impact to the community. And so we're looking at that. Could be a kind of an all-in-one concept that would have the police department on the main floor, and then a lot of growth opportunity with this current property here. So that is a need, a very real need. But I think if I'm prioritizing, which I am, I need the officers before the building. But the building, you're going to hear us talk about that because we've had open houses. We've kind of showed our challenges there. And so that is a very real need.
There was a question about the this levy is replacing a past levy, or that's one that is expiring. Can you kind of just talk about the differences between what's the ones that's expiring and then the one that is coming into play?
Well, there has never been a police levy, to my knowledge, in the city of Tigard ever. And so I maybe what they're asking about is with the library bond expiring, and if we were to go out to the voters and re-up that, then yes, that would be for a police building or an all-in-one concept. So bonds are different than the levy and the taxes, and there are budget officers and the city manager that can talk more in depth, or our elected officials. But the two are different. And yes, the library bond is expiring, and it would be a great opportunity for us to look at extending that if the voters saw the need, which would be for a police facility.
Very cool. Thank you. That's all the questions we have from Facebook at this time.
So it looks like Brian Smith with the TV FNR union has joined us. He's one of our panelists. So Brian, I know one of the questions that we wanted to hear from the union was why the firefighters union is in support of this police safety levy.
Sure. Yeah, this is Brian Smith, 12th and Valley Firefighters Union. I'm also a captain at Station 50 on Walnut and Gardy. So our union and our PAC committee, we look to endorse campaigns or candidates that are good for our members, also good for our employer, who's TVFNR. And part of that is appreciating the importance of good and strong partnerships with other agencies and other unions. Also, as a firefighter, I can tell you how important it is for us to have a strong, dedicated police force, because they help us on calls all the time, whether it's a traffic accident, a cardiac arrest, or a patient that's being threatening to us physically. So we rely on solid, well-funded local police agencies, and so that's why we're supporting this this levy.
Great, thank you. Jessica, do we have any more questions from our Facebook community?
Yes, we had one more that just came in.
Okay.
Are these additional officers going to be enough when light rail comes?
That's a good question.
It is. And, you know, I think what I would say to anybody is, I think this is a responsible ask. I think it addresses, you know, our shortage in the past, but also an anticipation in the future. I think it's a reasonable number that, again, with the hiring challenges is enough for us to take on. I think it's important in these 5 years, because remember, the levy is just 5 years. And I think it's important to be able to show what we hope to accomplish with those 8 officers and the school resource officer. So yes, for 5 years, I think it'll be responsible. There has been, as I said before, we do participate with TriMet on the transit police. So we have officers who are familiar and can come in on any new rail add-on like the Orange Line, they do have quite a bit of presence there, and to try and deter it if somebody thinks that this is a great opportunity with a new line coming in. So I think there'll be some plans to be able to handle that. And again, I think it's a responsible number, and that we can hopefully back up with what we're trying to accomplish so that the voters feel like they're getting their money's worth.
Great. Do any of our panelists have any final comments they would like to make?
I do, Debbie.
Maureen?
Yeah, I appreciated one of the Facebook questions about have you reviewed the budget and looked at other strategies in cost savings. And I just would really encourage voters who are curious about that to look at the city's tax structure. I think Tigard is unique where their tax rates were frozen, if you will, and just the support. I mean, if you look at combination of the city's revenue along with the services from Tualatin Valley Fire, we really work on a tight budget, and it's challenging. So I feel from just an economic financial perspective, this is fair. And certainly needed, but definitely responsible ask. So I just wanted to make that final plug. And it's a great question, but I do encourage just some perspectives on that so people to know it really is a very fair ask. So thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this.
Debbie, I would like to give my final remarks, for City of Tigard, with its growth and economic development, it will attract a lot of good brains and a lot of smart individuals. And I think this is this levy is very important, to integrate, by design for our future growth and future engaging community. I think it's very important for all of us to support such an important and trust, our police department, that they are doing the right thing, and our city leadership doing the right thing. So, Chief Kathy, we are very happy to have you and your team in our public square.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone else have any final comments? No? Okay. So I would like to close out by saying that the Tigard Chamber is also an endorser of this public safety levy. I usually go in and update City Council once a month on what's going on with our business community. And usually I follow the chief, so I get to listen to her monthly update to council. And as I have sat there through the months and I've listened to her statistics, and I've looked at the call times increasing, and I've looked at the call volumes increasing, and I've looked at the societal calls in particular increasing. It was very obvious to me that we do need more police within our police department. I also personally sit on the board for Luchtdorf Behavioral Health. And so I know that officers having advanced training in how to deal with mental health crises is important for the welfare of not only that community member that's experiencing that, but the welfare of community members around them. And so as a chamber and as a government affairs committee, we looked at this levy. We saw the independent audit that said, yes, they've come up with the right number. And so for us as a business organization looking out for our business community, we feel like this ask is well within the bounds of what's being asked for. I would remind people that will be watching this video later or that are currently watching us live, that business also pays property taxes on their buildings that will help fund the police department. And so it's not like business is asking just residents and community members to help fund the police department, but the business community as well will see this in their tax bill to help support this. But we feel this is really important for both the safety and the quality of life of both our business and our residential communities and our schools. So that is why the Tigard Chamber, on behalf of our business community, has supported this levy. So I think we're done. I would like to thank all of our panelists for participating and taking your time. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chief, and thank you to those in our Facebook audience. And with that, I think we are finished.